This is the Photoshop straight ahead frame by frame animation tutorial for Additive. First you want to open up Photoshop. So come down to your dock and click on the Photoshop icon. It's a PS in a box. Then you'll get the welcome window, the welcome screen. You want to start a new file. So you go to New, and you see all of your options. You want to do a film and video. And this semester I want everyone to use the HDV HDTV 720p 29.97 preset. So we come down to the presets and you choose the HDV HDTV 720p document 1280 by 720 pixels. You'll notice that the width is 1280 pixels, the height is 720 pixels, the orientation is landscape. The resolution does not matter because we're not printing it. Resolution only really matters if you're printing it. The thing that matters is how many pixels do you have. So our pixels width is 1280. The color mode is RGB color, 8-bit. And for this one, the background contents can be white. If you look under the advanced options, you'll see the color profile and pixel aspect ratio. But you don't need to color manage this document, and your pixel aspect ratio should be square, so just leave that. I'm going to click on Create, and this is what you'll see. Now, if you don't see this, it just means you need to change to the correct workspace. But since we used a preset, you should have the motion workspace, and this is the motion workspace. It's got a timeline at the bottom, and you see it says Untitled. So we're going to change the name. We're going to File and Save As, and you're going to save this with a name that uses your last name. And you can see the last time I used this, I was doing a lot of different these are titles for things, so I'm going to change what we're doing. I'm going to change it to the desktop there. I'm going to give this a title that is coded to show who I am, because when I'm grading, I want to know who I'm grading. So I'm going to use my last name. So you would use your last name, don't use mine. My first initial. And then this particular animation is called Additive. So it should be your last name, your first initial. I like a little underscore, makes it easier to read, and then Additive. It's going to be saved as a PSD or Photoshop document. Don't change the format and save it. So now you've got it with the name at the top on the tab. And you've got your workspace here. These lines show you the title safe and action safe bounds, where you have to keep things within these edges because people can't read the text. If it goes outside of that space, they're not going to focus on it, they won't see the words, and sometimes monitors will not display correctly. It will cut off part of the box. You want to stay inside of the title safe. So make sure at the upper right that you are in the motion, in your motion workspace. I'm going to reset motion, and it's happy, nothing had to change. At the bottom of the screen you can see the timeline panel, and there's a field down here with two options. You can either create a video timeline or create a frame animation. So we're going to create a frame animation for this first one. So make sure it says Create Frame Animation, and then click on the words, because this is a button. And you see this is the first frame of our frame animation. Here's this nice big area here. Now I don't need the library, so I'm going to come up to Window and I'm going to close the library because I need to have the layers. I'm going to use a lot of layers. Command S once again to make sure you've got it saved. Now we want to select a fill color. So come down to the fill color and click on it, and then you can choose a bright blue. We want a nice bright color of blue. And this looks like a good one. It's bright. And this means it's not printable, but we're not printing it, right? Remember that print has fewer colors available than video because of the way that the color is created. This is an additive color set, so you will see more colors on a video monitor than you would see on a piece of paper. So this doesn't really matter. We're going to say okay. The only time it matters is if the color starts to bleed into other colors, and this usually happens with reds and sometimes blues when you're next to something else. We're just using blue on a white screen, so we don't have to worry about it at this point. Okay, we're going to get a brush. And we want to make sure the brush is a good size, so I'm going to come up here and make sure that this is 24, and I want to make sure that it's got a hard edge, so 100% hardness. Choose one of the brushes that doesn't have a fuzzy outline. You want it to have a nice sharp outline. I've got 24 pixels, and that's what I want. So that's good. So now I have a brush selected, I've got a color selected, and I have a frame animation, and I'm ready to do something. Now before I do anything though, I'm going to change the background layer here. Now this is easy to do. Double click on the word background and it comes open and says layer 0 and say okay. So now I have a layer that is not locked and it's not the background layer. It's a layer. And I'm going to draw on this layer and I'm going to draw just one piece. What we're going to do is we're going to build up the letter A, a capital letter A. So you're going to select a spot where you're going to start drawing, and you will draw a small piece of the letter A. And we want to have 15 frames. So you'll end up with 15 layers, and each of those layers will be part of the letter A. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here, and we're going to set down to the left of the center, because this is the bottom of the A leg, and I'm going to draw a small piece of an A. Now I'm going to Command S to save it and say OK. Now I want to duplicate this layer, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to build on this mark. Each of these marks will build on the previous mark, and that will create the entire letter A. So what we want to do is we want to duplicate this layer. You can either use the layer palette here and duplicate layer, or what I like to do, because it's faster, is I press Command J and it copied it. You can see it says layer 0 copy. So now I'm going to, now you just add some more and then Command J. Add some more, Command J. And you're going to do that until you get to copy 13. Okay, Command S to save it. Now we're going to get the move tool. We're not going to move anything, but we just don't want to make an accidental mark. And this is just one frame still, just one frame. Now we're going to use the timeline menu, which is this little patch of lines at the right-hand corner of the timeline menu. Click on it, and we're going to use Make Frames from Layers. And now you see that we have now separate frames. Each of them is made from a layer. And it does this by turning off all the eyeballs for everything except the current layer. That way you actually have all 15 layers on each frame. If you wanted, you could turn them all on, but don't do that. Now we're going to come over to the bottom here and we're going to change on the lower left. You'll see that there is the looping options, and you can select, click on that triangle, and you can select forever. That way it will continuously loop. which is always easier to watch when you have a short animation. Now we're going to select this word 0 seconds here in the first frame, click on the triangle and change it to say 0.1 seconds. So that's a delay. The delay is essentially going to be your frames per second. So this is going to be 10 frames per second because it's 1/10 of a second per frame. Now I'm going to select all of the rest of these at the same time. And if you go ahead and select 1 second while all of them are selected, you'll see it changes them all to 0.1 second. And there you have your animation time set. Now Command S. Now check to see how it works. Please select all the frames by clicking on one frame. And let us click the playhead. And now you see how it works. That's what it looks like. Okay, let's stop it. Go back to frame 1. Command S to make sure it's saved. Now we're going to go to the right side of the timeline again. And now we are going to convert this to a video timeline. Now this is what a video timeline looks like, and since we have such a short animation, it's very hard to see where it is, but we can drag the slider at the bottom to the right hand side with the tall mountain, and when you get somewhere in the middle you can see this shows you how long this lasts. It converts it to 30 frames per second, and since we were using 10 frames per second and we had 15 frames, it's 1.5 seconds. So now we can play that again by clicking on the arrow here, and you see it looks pretty much the same. Go back to the first frame, Command S. Now, to actually save this and make it into a video or an MP4 QuickTime file, compressed, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to File, and we're going to Export, and we're going to Render Video. You see it says the name. It takes the name we gave it and it appends the MP4 at the end. You want to make sure it's saving as an MP4. If you need to, you want to make sure that this says Adobe Media Encoder. Okay, so you don't want to save it as an image sequence. The format is H.264. That is the type of compression. Okay. Preset high quality. Document size 1280 by 720. Document frame rate 30 frames per second. Field order preset progressive. Aspect document 1.0. All frames, and just leave the render options alone, and then just render it. And it's just telling you where it's going to put it. It's going to put it into this folder for me, so I'm going to change that to save it to the desktop. You can make a new folder, and you could call this PSD straight ahead tutorials, and then choose that and render it, and it has saved it. And now you can file and close. If we come out here, here's my straight ahead tutorials, and here it is. There's my additive. If I press my space bar while it's selected, it will play it. And you can see that's what it looks like. Okay, so that is the first tutorial.